right now we're going to turn our attention to preventive measures with food security within a retail environment. And joining us is a thought leader in this space, Daniel Liu. Daniel is a principal with the Rimkus Consulting Group. And if you're not familiar with Rimkus, they are an outstanding resource for expertise and consultation in a variety of areas, and certainly huge value adds in your litigation support needs. So please make sure you check out their website, because they also have some outstanding resources in terms of webinars and general continuing education programs to bring you and your teams up to date. But Daniel's focus has been on safety and security for many, many years. And so I don't want to get in his way. I want to bring him on board as quickly as possible. Welcome back, Daniel.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, and for those of you that have not had a chance to listen to Daniel's TED-style talk, it was fantastic, and his outline is as well. He lays out a really detailed checklist to help you understand the different areas that you need to be thinking about in terms of at your site, supply chain type issues, even hiring. So he covered the gamut. So Daniel, give us a little recap, if you will, kind of what you told us in the TED style talk, and then we'll have some questions from the audience. And if not, I have plenty.
Okay. Well, basically, it was a talk on the guidance of protecting, retail food establishments, industry best practices that should be followed. And like, as you mentioned, it ran the gamut from hiring, pre-hiring, post-hiring, physical security, of the sites, issues as far as logistics and supply chain. So, I mean, it's a very broad topic. There's a lot of nuances to it as well. When you try to break it down, definitely something that would more in depth than a typical TED talk, but I just wanted to provide as much information as I could on the topic, because I mean, especially with the current event of what's going on, COVID is obviously going to, throw another monkey wrench in this situation as far as food security, retail food security. So I just wanted to basically provide as much information on this topic as I could.
Yeah, and you did an outstanding job, and I want to drill down a little bit today, if that's okay. And again, if you're in the audience, feel free to chime in whenever you'd like to, or raise your hand, and we'll call on you. But with Zoom and Zoom rooms, it's kind of understood that you have to kind of interrupt. So feel free, Daniel. It won't bother Daniel in the least, and it definitely won't bother me. But Daniel, in your experience, and I know you work around this a lot because you did cover a lot of ground. But if you were in one of these quick service restaurants, or one of these fast casual restaurants, where would you prioritize your efforts right now on the food safety, food security side?
Like I said, due to current events, I would prioritize it mainly right now in the physical aspect, ensuring that there is no vulnerabilities that can be basically taken advantage of as far as trying to get access to the site or access to restricted areas of restaurants. The logistics side of it, that can be a major issue as far as that in operations. So I think if I had to prioritize out of the 5 elements of this topic, I would say the physical security, facility operations, and ensuring that you're mitigating any risk as far as any vulnerabilities.
Okay, and so what we're talking about there is kind of the physical perimeter.
Correct. That's correct.
But that could be external and internal in these facilities, right?
Very true. Very true.
Yeah, because we need to be sure that we're that the delivery systems, right, are safe and that they're effective. But then, as you just pointed out, we don't want to allow anybody to gain access to our restricted areas, because they could contaminate. They could, and you just don't know today, do you? People, there's some evil minds out there.
There are. I mean, this this guidance was put into effect by the FDA actually soon after 9/11. Basically because they understood the vulnerabilities that terrorism presented, how that could be, used as a way to harm innocents, basically poison the food supply, and harm other people in that way. Obviously, it's had to evolve, post 9/11. Now, as I said, because of COVID going on, that's going to be, probably, put into the guidance as well. But yes, it's there's obviously public sides of a restaurant where, you want to allow ease of access. I mean, it is a hospitality industry. It's customer service driven. But you need to compartmentalize and, separate the public side from the private side where, certain employees can go. And then even in that aspect, there has to be a need to, for certain employees to have an access right to certain areas. One example is a lot of restaurants carry, they hold chemicals on the property that, should not, are deemed hazardous and should not in any way be accessed by people who don't need to have access to it. You need to control that, in any way you can, whatever measures, management needs to be involved. So there's a lot of moving parts when it comes to the access control issue.
Yeah, that's for sure. And then of course you need, on the internal side, as you just pointed out, you've also got to be extra cautious with customers today. Because they can access things. We've had lots of cases in hotels where customers access areas that they shouldn't, and that leads to bad things. I haven't seen as much of that, Daniel, in the restaurant side, but it could just be because I haven't been, paying attention to that space.
Correct. I mean, when this guidance came out, is for it is for retail food sites, but it can be applied to hospitality overall, as you said. Hotels, that they have resorts areas, they're probably more susceptible to any, issues arising from, hostile elements trying to do something, wrong to the food supply, rather than, a mom and pop's restaurant or, a fast food chain. But as I said, it can still be applicable to both aspects of that.
Well, let's talk kind of very specifically then now, because since you're in Houston and, across Texas, and potentially in other states, not as severely affected as we were in Texas, and we won't go into all the reasons for that, but we did end up, and I think some communities still have boil water notices. Correct. So the question is, from a safety and security perspective, I'm assuming, Daniel, that your guidance would have been for most places to not risk opening when we were under a boil water notice, or is there a solution that enables people to do that? And then I want to follow up after this with kind of once it's lifted, what we need to do. But you go ahead with the original.
Well, I mean, as you said, I mean, I guess that's the needs of the business. I mean, that, you have to be practical in that aspect if you want to open or not. Obviously, a lot of businesses within the greater Houston area, because of what happened last week, were not able to. And if they were, they just need to work on, being abreast of what's going on with public water provider systems. Not every, restaurant or hospitality business has, the ability to do this, but some have non-municipal water wells. So ensuring that, they're secured, water systems in the trucks are equipped with proper backflow prevention. If they do have their own non-municipal water system, ensuring that, that it has proper chlorine levels to maintain safety, and identifying alternate sources of potable water. Obviously, as we both said, last week, that was a big issue here in town. And I know that a lot of businesses, were not even able to, they didn't even have a large enough footprint to be able to have their own, non-municipal water wells. But, some of the bigger, establishments, hotel chains, I know that they were able to open because they had access to these private systems.
Yeah, that would have been interesting. If you're a smaller operator, for all the reasons you mentioned, that might be those might be the reasons you want to stay closed, right?
Exactly.
That would have been challenging. So, okay, so the city then, or your community, they lift the boil water notice, right? I just can't go in and turn on the taps, right? Or can I? Does that mean everything's back going and the water is not contaminated because the pressure's back up? And to be fair, Daniel, that's what it is, right? My understanding is that the pressure in the systems has dropped below a certain level, and that allows potential contamination to occur. So
Correct.
once they get the pressure levels back up, but does that mean that the waters that are in the pipes are okay, or do we need to run water for a few minutes to clear the pipes?
Correct. I mean, best practices is and what, the messages that came out from the city of Houston. I mean, I got them all on my cell phone throughout the whole week. And when they lifted the boil water advisory, the best practices are run your water faucets for at least a minute, empty your ice trays. If you have, freezers that make automatic ice, some examples they did say, you should still boil water for another hour, after running your pipes, just to be safe. A lot of it, I would say, is common sense guidance as well. But you need to, like I said, you need to understand the specifics of what's going on. Obviously, this was a natural disaster, if you want to call it that. It was not anything man-made, but it's the same countermeasures, the same responses that you would have for both.
Okay, that sounds terrific. I want to step out in just a second. David, are you still with us? I know it shows you are, but are you? David Denny is going to do a talk a little later on ghost kitchens. But David, I want to get you to pop in real quick, because I know you represent a lot of restaurants. And I was just curious what your guidance was to the restaurants around what we're talking about now with the lack of water.
Boy, I learned a lot of interesting tricks. That's what tell you what, I learned that you can pop the ceiling tiles in the kitchen to make sure the pipes in the ceiling don't freeze. So I saw a lot of tips and tricks circulating, but thankfully, City of Dallas did not go under a water boil notice. City of University Park here did, and everybody had to close. And so, there's no real, nobody has any walking around knowledge in Texas about what to do for a water boil notice, because it never happens to us. So they just sort of went in the next day after the water boil notice was on and just ran the taps for as long as they could, and just sort of flushed water down the drain, which is crazy because we were also in a conserved water situation, but what the hell are you going to do? So they just tried to, it's sort of like when you put new filters in your refrigerator, you just have to run it till it's clear. And, so there were some people that were serving. The good thing about independent restaurants is they have the ability to be flexible, creative in a moment's notice. So I got invited to we don't have any food. We're only pouring alcohol. We're only taking cash, and wear your ski clothes party in a parking lot, and that's sort of how they adapted for that day. It was really cool to see, but nobody knew what to do in terms of how long do you run the taps. They couldn't look it up on the internet. There was nothing clear. No one really called me, but I was asking around like, hey, are you open and how are you open?
Yeah,
so
we should have
just ran the taps.
Yeah, that's instead of better call Saul, we better call Daniel to get that. Thanks, David. That's very helpful.
Yeah.
I was curious how you manage that. Daniel, let's shift gears for a minute. Can we talk a little bit about, and look, we've all been at this a while, but is there anything new in terms of securing the supply chain when it comes from the distribution house, get it in the back door, get it into appropriate storage? We've got some challenges going on here now, but do you have any thoughts around that maybe people haven't thought of lately?
Well, I don't want to say if it's anything new. These are established best practices, but as far as, securing a supply chain, just ensuring when, you have deliveries that they're on a scheduled time. You don't want any unscheduled deliveries, unclear, vendors who haven't been cleared by your business, because that's just suspicious in itself. You need to have proper access control in place, whether that's by a manager with a key, or a key card issue, or a passcode to enter the premises. As I said, there are already established best practices, but you need to ensure that you comply with them. And then to be honest, and now that you brought that up, you also have to be cognizant of, local city ordinances. There's state laws that cover, restaurants securing, their food source, and local governments as well. So you need to be able to comply with the law. Not every, municipality may have a statute on this, but there are those that do.
Okay. Yeah. Very helpful. Well, that's good. Let's shift gears in and let's talk about theft for a moment. I know you work in that space as well. So when I was in the business, we always kind of figured if somebody volunteered to take the trash out, it was because they were,
Exactly.
taking things out the back door, putting it in the dumpster, and then going to go pick it up later. I assume that's still a potential, but
It is.
you've probably seen it. Can you share a few other things you've seen that we need to be guarding against, or against just some of the best practices around theft?
Well, as far as when it comes to, internal theft, which makes up the majority of loss to almost all businesses, it's not external. The majority is internal. It's as you said, supervision of your staff, ensuring, people where they're supposed to be, controlling the access to certain areas. It's just being cognizant of the people around, your employees. If you see any signs of tampering, where, someone's trying, tamper with the countermeasure that you may have in place in the back office side of the restaurant, conducting, a routine investigation on that. That these are, basically, as you said, as long as we've been doing this, things that have occurred, they continue to occur. And, they will occur. It's up to the management team, ownership to ensure that, they're, providing an appropriate level of supervision to all their staff.
Yeah, that's really crucial, of course, for sure. Yeah. So Daniel, what about when we've had outbreaks before? Obviously we're in the middle of COVID, but the other outbreaks that have happened have been pretty severe. Is there something you can share with us that you've kind of gleaned from these outbreaks that is kind of the common denominator that we need to be on? I mean, obviously, practice our sanitation skills, be sure everybody is trained, and we reinforce the training. But along those lines, are other common denominators from an expert perspective, have you seen that you could share with the folks on the call?
Well, I mean, as far as finding common issues to why these events occur, whether it's natural or man-made, I mean, that runs the gamut. I think as far as a business, not just within retail food, but, any business overall, when you are dealing with, a customer service-based industry, it's just making sure that, you conduct an initial assessment on your food security procedures, that you have a proper crisis management strategy in place to deal with any issue that may arise, whether, like I said, it's man-made or natural. Having a proper plan for emergency evacuation, preventing security breaches, just, I guess, the guidance to, to maintain adherence to industry best practices. It's just having that overall, risk management, crisis management strategy in place, established, within your industry or within your business, to mitigate any loss, whether it's loss to profit, loss to life, mitigating possible litigation. I mean, these all have to be, encompassed, in your crisis management strategy. And I know, from what I believe, as long as any business has that in place, they're able to deal with whatever issues may arise, whether it's something that happened with Houston last week, where, this entire city shut down, because we just don't have the infrastructure to deal with an issue like that, or whether it's something that's more malicious in nature, where someone is actually trying to cause harm.
Yeah, for sure. So I want to get down to something specific you mentioned in your outline, and that's pest control. Obviously, everybody's focusing on pest control, but what's the best time? I've got a food service establishment. I'm open. almost all the time. How concerned do I need to be about contamination from a pest control service? And is there, and how much, is there a particular best practice in terms of time to open, from the time, of the service to the time we get back to open, or time we start prepping our food sources again? Because that could be a serious contamination issue.
Correct. I mean, best practices, basically, when you have vendors that come into your business to clean, whether it's just a routine cleaning or if it's to deal with a pest control issue, that's definitely after hours. And you want to adhere to as far as what the guidance is, if they have to use chemicals that are hazardous to deal with a possible pest issue, as far as the hours that you need to stay closed to ensure safety of staff and the public. So I mean, obviously best practice is to do that after hours. I mean, that's what most businesses do already, if they have any type of cleaning issues, as I said. But it's just you want, when you have, as I said, a lot of restaurants have these chemicals on property in the premises to deal with pests or something else. You need to keep that completely separate from the, obviously, I mean, this is common sense, you would think, but issues do arise.
They do.
Yeah.
They do.
So ensuring that they're completely separate and compartmentalized from the food side of the business.
Okay, and I know this may not be your area of expertise, and if it is, what about fire safety challenges? Do you work in that space at all? I'm sorry, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I do. I work with individuals within the facilities sector. Because security and facilities work hand in hand, dealing with a lot of issues, and fire control is aligned with access control. So ensuring that you're adhering to also local ordinances, if there is an issue, that individuals are allowed to get out of the business, where there's nothing that's stopping them from, nothing restricting them from leaving. So, it's, a lot of that is, set up by law, by statute. But, security and facilities work hand in hand in that, just to make sure that everything, is in working order if a fire would occur. You want to have ease of access to be able to get out of the business, out of the facility, and get away from the danger.
Yeah, that's a great point. And of course, with COVID, the occupancy limits, we typically don't have to worry about that right now. But
Correct.
When we get back to going, and I hope everybody else is feeling the momentum that I am, given some of the things that are happening these days, I think we're starting to look pretty positive going forward. But I do want to point out a couple of things, Daniel, just make sure you're on the same page. But I do think it's important that we pay attention and do our best to comply with fire marshal occupancy limits.
Correct.
In our spaces. You've probably seen fires and situations where there were horrible deaths and tragedies because we overcrowded our spaces.
Correct.
And that's whether it's in a quick service establishment or even a hotel. I know we have some hoteliers on the call as well, that in your meeting spaces, you need to be mindful of that, because as Daniel just pointed out, if it does happen, those numbers of exits are there for a reason, and that limited number of people is established for a reason, right, Daniel? Because that's how many people the fire marshal has figured out, with the pace of the spread of the fire, can exit safely out of that location. Is that a fair way to describe it?
I mean, yeah, you nailed it on the head. I mean, obviously, like you said, with COVID going on, individuals being allowed in a business has been greatly reduced. It's a lot more controlled now. I think that's also because we have a lot more public buy-in due to the COVID issue. But yes, there's been, incidents where, a fire or some type of disaster has occurred, and there was, a maximum, I guess you could say, or an increased loss of life or damages to property or, something along those lines, because they were overcrowded. That could have been, it may have not been completely mitigated, but they could have mitigated a certain percentage of that loss if they adhered to, the guidance or the local ordinance. So yes, correct. I mean, but like I said in the beginning, due to COVID and from what I see, when in Houston, they have businesses that are open where you can go and frequent for food or whatever you'd like to do. Obviously, how much people are allowed in has been reduced. But there has been, from what I see, a public buy-in on this. I think everybody understands that we're in this together, or most people do. And you're seeing that now more than you did before this pandemic occurred.
Yeah, I think that's a very fair point. Daniel, let me pause. I want to be mindful of our time. We just have a few minutes left, and I've been kind of bogarting all the time. I'm impressed that you know that word. Good. So, does anybody in the audience have a question for Daniel before I ask another one? Okay, Daniel, in our interest of time, a couple of things that drive me crazy, and these are really kind of petty things, but I think given COVID, they're kind of more on our radar. I still see service people delivering drinks to customers by holding, I'm going to try to put my hand up, see if it'll get it on this, but holding the rim of the glass with their fingers. Is it just me, or is that just a poor hygienic practice? Please tell me I'm right.
No, I mean, you're exactly right. I mean, you're nailed that one on the head as well. Obviously with what's going on, you need to be cognizant of, public safety issues, public health issues. And I think most staff, from what I see, most staff at a lot of establishments that I've frequented lately, they're aware of this. I think that's a trainability issue. As comes to anything with safety and security, it's obviously, there's no malice involved in that. I think that's just something that's trainable and can be addressed. But yeah, I mean, it's still, when I see that, I still irk a little bit, because, just everything going on.
Drink out of the other side of the glass. Yes, right. Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm glad to hear that I'm not being too picky about that, but I see like I'm like, I kind of cringe a little bit.
Right.
Oh my gosh, that's great. So let me ask you, this is just a curiosity question. Do you think we'll ever go back to shaking hands?
I mean, I've had that conversation with a few peers, whether it's in my professional groups or personal groups, and I mean, I'm not really too sure. I mean, I think us as a society has changed due to this issue. I don't know if we're going to go back to exactly how things were. But as something that I learned in my years in security, as long as you're adaptable, and you can pretty much overcome any situation. I know it will get better. I'm just not sure if it'll go back to everybody just, especially if you're in a group of people who you don't know, everybody just patting each other on the back and, being like that anymore. But I do believe that it will get better from a safety and security aspect.
Well, yeah, I think you're right as well. I think we've learned a lot of lessons, as David Denny pointed out earlier. There's so many things we've learned, and we've had to be creative. It's going to be very interesting to see how it comes back. Well, Daniel, we're out of time, but thank you very much for joining us, for expanding on your really tremendous TED Talk. If you haven't had a chance to listen to that, I encourage everyone to do so. And Daniel, we'll look forward to having you back in the